Hello everyone, welcome to Digital Tech Talk Series 1 of AIT Extension, Asian Institute of Technology, Bangkok, Thailand. Our today talk on digital transformation, future proofing with hybrid workforce and cloud computing. This is Shahin Hossain from AIT Extension. Our today's talk have three portions. First one is introduction of digital transformation. Second, cloud computing and digital transformation. Third, hybrid workforce and digital transformation. Each part will continue 20 minutes. At the end, there is a 20 minutes question and Q&A session, whereas participants or audience could apply their questions, query, or any suggestion, whatever they have. During the session, any participants, if want to ask any questions or any query, they can use our chat box to put their questions or can raise hand to ask their questions. Thank you so much. Now I would like to hand over to speak my supervisor, Mr. Bhoravet Chonlatin, the director of AIT Extension.
Thank you very much, Shaheen. Hello, everyone. This is Bhoravet Cholasins. I'm working in AIT Extension of the Asian Institute of Technologies here in Thailand. So, welcoming you to the Tech Talk that we actually plans to launch this in a face-to-face basis. But since we have the COVID-19 pandemic, so we have to change our plan to launch this as a online programs, as a webinar programs. But as you know, that AIT is, be able to put together the program that emphasizing on the digital technology, so that we would like to introduce to you this program as the first one in the series of the digital transformation. So AIT is not working alone in this adventure. We have to work with the partner who have the specialization in the digital transformation. In this situation, in this case, we are working with Abalon's labs and also the blockchain lab AI specialists, so that they can provide technical inputs and also sharing the practical experience, which I will also introduce later on in the beginning of these sessions. Please allow me to also introduce to you our boss of AIT Extensions, Dr. Jonathan Shaw, Executive Director of AIT Extension, to say welcome few words to welcome the audience that coming from everywhere in the world this afternoon. So Dr. Jonathan Shaw, please.
Thank you, Kunjo, and I will keep my words very brief. This is a very warm welcome from the Asian Institute of Technology and particularly from AIT Extension. We're looking forward to being introduced to a number of exciting and innovative opportunities for digital transformation. So we've been working with Ivan throughout the early months of this year. We're looking forward to building our partnership with him, and we're delighted to welcome him this afternoon. So thank you very much, and over to you, Ivan and Joe. Thank you.
Thank you, Dr. Shaw. So Ivan Spilibin is our speaker today. Ivan has been working in many countries, in Malaysia, in China, in Pakistan, in Hong Kong, in Singapore, and in Thailand. So basically, Ivan is the technologist who is running the technologies related to the software development and blockchain technologies. And Ivan's company also working with the partners like Abalon's labs in order to transfer the knowledge to us on the digital transformation, which is very important in every country and in every sectors in our organizations. So with Ivan's practical experience and also dealing with the technology himself, we believe that this session will give you a kind of introductory landscape that you can pick up the key points that you may later on analyze it and be able to reflect in the organization and see how you have to adopt that into your organization in order to cope with the situation that we are facing today. So without further ado, I would like to now request Ivan to start the talk and the presentation. As Charlie has said, feel free to raise questions by raising your hands and typing your text. And also, we also allow you to have a voice question later on during the session, also at the end of the session. So Ivan Philippine, please.
Thank you, Joe. Thank you, Shaheen and John. And thank you, AIT, for welcoming us this afternoon. Thank you, everyone, for participating. This is indeed a session on digital transformation. Before we go in there, let me just give you a little bit of my background, as Joe's already done. I'm the co-founder of Ablon Labs. We specialize in helping companies with digital transformation, helping companies with deciding which technologies to use, which tools to use. We provide training, we provide on-site information to companies to help them through, the digital transformation of their company or dealing with times like the times. Today's session is on digital transformation, and unlike what most people believe or think, digital transformation obviously is about technology, but it's not all about technology. I would say that about 25% of the process really involves technology, and the remaining 75% is about communication. It's about how you deal with people. So today we want to focus on two aspects of digital technology, which is the cloud computing component and the hybrid workforce component. We're not going to go into the technology aspect. We're not going to go into the communication aspect. There's a limited amount of time. And each of these topics actually requires quite a bit of study. So what we hope to achieve today is give you some insights into what cloud computing is, give you some insights into how it works, some insights into what a hybrid workforce is, how that works, RPA is, what AI is, how these can work in combination to actually help your organization in times like COVID-19, but also simply with digital transformation, with workforce from the office environment to a home environment or a remote work environment. So that's what we aim to get through today. As Shaheen and Joe already outlined, I want this section to be as interactive as possible. So at any point in time, if you have questions, feel free to ask your questions. You can either raise your hand and we will plug you in to ask the question, or you can simply type the question in your Zoom chat window, and then we'll deal with the question at the end of the Q&A session, or you can type your question in the Facebook live chat window, and again, we'll pull them out at the end and we'll address as many of the questions as possible at the end of the presentation. All right, so let's move into digital transformation. Okay, so we jump straight into cloud computing and the benefits of cloud computing. I would assume that most of you are aware, most of you know what cloud computing is. You would be reasonably familiar with it, given the fact that you are currently using it. You have actually used the cloud to log into this section. You're using Zoom, which is a cloud-based program, or you're using Facebook Live, which is a cloud-based program. And you're basically using this all the time. If you've ever posted anything on Instagram, or if you're doing line chats, you're using Facebook, all of those programs and all of those systems are actually cloud-based solutions. So they allow you to log in from anywhere at any time, irrespective of whether it's on your computer, on your mobile phone, or someone else's computer, or a computer in a different location, irrespective of where you are around the world, and irrespective of what time of day it is. You get access to your social media platform, you get access to your video conference platform, or any other platform that you want to use. That is really what cloud computing is about. It is about having a single location where you access the tools that you need, and irrespective of where those tools are actually located. So you don't really care where your Facebook page is hosted. You actually don't know where your Facebook page is hosted or where your Instagram pages are hosted. They can be hosted over a variety of servers in a variety of clouds around the world. It doesn't actually matter, because you see one consolidated view. And the same applies to using technology within companies and moving that technology onto the cloud. So you get a wealth of benefits by moving your company onto a cloud. You become more cost efficient, simply due to the fact that I was talking to Joe about this over lunch as well. Our entire organization is cloud-based, and that means that we pay a license for use. It's all software as a service. So we don't actually have to buy licenses. We don't have to install licenses on our computer. We don't have to install software on our computer. Whenever we get a new employee or we want to use a new system, we activate that and deactivate that at a click of a button. That also means that we can access that software from anywhere at any point in time, whether it's phone, tablet, or computer, from anywhere around the world. Means we don't need to invest in expensive hardware. We simply use, touchscreen computers or in this case, Microsoft Surface. We access the programs that we need, and if we no longer need them, we simply disable the access and we're no longer paying for them. So we're simply paying by use of the tools that we have. This is allowing us to be extremely mobile. It allows us to work remotely, especially in the current situation with the COVID-19 pandemic. And if I look at my own company, back in early March, the government decided that they wanted to close down the country. They wanted to lock down the country. And we were already working 100% cloud-based. And for us, that simply meant that our people were no longer working from the office, but were working from home or from a remote location instead. Our productivity didn't change. Our accessibility to our suppliers and our customers didn't change. But I know that that is the fact for a lot of companies. A lot of companies were impacted with immediately having to deal with the situation, immediately having to understand how they were going to communicate with their employees, how they were going to work going forward, how file sharing would work, and all of those things. Cloud computing, or using cloud computing, simply gives you that immediate benefit that you can work remotely. These services that you can use for cloud computing are highly certified. They are highly secure. They follow ISO processes and other security standards. They have enabled us as a company to actually bid. A lot of our customers here in Thailand are banks. They've enabled us as a company to bid for projects with banks because of the high security certificates that the cloud provider had to offer. They're very, very easy to set up and automatically update, so you don't have to worry about that. They're also easy to maintain for the provider, since everyone that is using the cloud service is using a single instance of the application. So they don't have to worry about which version you're using. Everyone is only using the latest version at any point in time. So they can actually decrease their maintenance costs. They can decrease their hosting costs. They don't need to run multiple systems. And you get the benefit of always having the latest application at your fingertips. At the same time, they greatly help with team collaboration. They help with people working remotely on the same documents. You can see who's working on it. You can see what they're entering into the document. So you're literally working like you're sitting next to each other, and yet you might be 1,000 kilometers apart. It makes no difference. And obviously, the other added advantage of this is that clouds are backed up constantly. You can replicate your cloud environment immediately. You can immediately do disaster recovery if necessary. Your documents are all stored in multiple locations, and these systems usually do the version control for you. So you don't have to worry about overwriting something in a document. You can simply go back to a previous version and find what you had overwritten in that instance. So, there's a variety of companies that are providing cloud services today that you, again, probably are familiar with, and they all offer virtually the same type of services. So you have Microsoft Azure, or Azure as it's known. You have the Google Cloud, you have Amazon Web Services. And, for a company to decide which cloud provider to use and where to move is a highly individual company decision. It really depends on what tools you're using today, what you're working with as a company. Are you more Google Documents based? Are you more Microsoft Documents based? Do you need neither of those? You're simply looking for hosting services. All of them provide you with hosting services. Some of them provide you with office equipment and tools. And all of them in terms of price are very, very similar. So the service you can get from Azure or Google or Amazon is very similar, and the pricing is very similar. So it really depends on you as an organization as to what you want to move into as the organization. Personally, I'm a big fan of Microsoft Azure. We've been using that at Abalon Labs for years. Everything is fully integrated, which I'll show you in just a minute. And a high degree of that integration, not just talking about Office documents, but also talking about software that we create for our clients, services that we provide for our clients. Everything is connected within this platform, and therefore it makes it very, very easy for anyone to have access to the right information at the right point in time, and to share that access across the company, across the network that we're running, with customers, with colleagues, and to share that information across the board. So if you look at Microsoft Azure as an example, their cloud ecosystem actually consists of Microsoft Office 365, which most of you are going to be familiar with. Either you're using it or you have used versions of Office in the past, which is Word, Excel, PowerPoint, which are the most common. You have Skype, for example, that was bought by Microsoft a few years ago. You have Microsoft Azure itself, which is hardware hosting. It provides you with database structures, infrastructures. It provides you with services. You have the cloud app security that comes with it. You have SharePoint that comes with it, which becomes your marketplace for your company for your internal communications. It's also the repository for your documentation, for any type of document you produce. So you can put your contracts on there, your invoices, your staff information. All of that is embedded within SharePoint. Then, of course, you have OneDrive, which is your personal space on the cloud. So rather than storing anything on your computer, you literally move on to storing everything on the cloud. Biggest benefit of that is that irrespective of where I am and whether or not I have my computer with me, I can always access everything related to my company. Now, I'm not just talking about documentation. I can access from anywhere. I can go into Azure DevOps, which we use for our software development, where I can actually see what the team is working on, what they have achieved today, what they're planning to do tomorrow. I can look at their sprints. I can look at the wiki pages that we're creating for our clients, the supporting documentation for the software that we're building. I can run reports from that immediately, so I can see productivity of our teams at any given point in time. We can host meetings with the teams through Microsoft Teams. So we have daily meetings that we have within our organization between different parties, which all runs through the cloud. And at the same time, I can access my calendars, I can access my Google documents, but we also use the Microsoft Marketplace. And in the Microsoft Marketplace, for example, we have time and attendance systems that are linked into our Office 365 system. So we manage time and attendance using Office 365. Similarly, we have onboarding processes that are managed through Office 365. So basically, the entire administration of our organization, our company, sits in Office 365, as well as our customer management, as well as our customer projects. The software that we develop, the software that we host for our customers, ongoing development, ongoing maintenance, all of that is actually embedded into this cloud system. That enabled us, as I said, with COVID-19, it enabled us to immediately move everyone to a different location, to no longer work in the same vicinity, and to continue working and to continue keeping our productivity up. So as a company, if you're looking for digital transformation, looking at cloud ecosystems and cloud infrastructure is going to be a very big part of that. You will have to decide, which type of cloud you need for your organization, which tools you need for your organization. And because most of these, or all of these, are pay-as-you-go services, they're all software-as-a-service models, that literally means that you only pay for what you consume. So today's day and age, everyone in the past had Microsoft Office on their computer, and they may have never used Microsoft Access, or they may have never used PowerPoint or never used Excel, yet you were still paying for a license for that. With a cloud ecosystem, you are simply paying for the types of services that you use. So we have a variety of systems. Like I said, we have Azure, we have Office 365, we have time and attendance systems, we have other systems. And each system has an individual arrangement for each employee. So not each employee needs to have access to each system. We can easily set that up. We can change that at any point in time. And we can remove and add employees as the need arises. So it makes it very, very easy for us to be very versatile and very agile in adding members to the team and removing members from the team, adding people to projects. We also work with third-party providers and partners we have in India and Vietnam. It's very easy for us to plug those partners into projects that they're working on in collaboration with us without opening up the rest of the company to them. So we have full control over how we set this up, and we have full control on a daily basis on how this is being used within our organization. And this has enabled us as a company to really, really work remotely, to work very agile, and to deal with problems like COVID-19 in a very effective manner. So if you're looking at digital transformation, moving to the cloud is an absolute must in that equation. And it's very important for you as a company to individually sit down and decide how are we going to move and what are we going to move. You talk about documentation, all your documentation goes onto the cloud, but you want to have separate setups in SharePoint, for example, for your management team, for your staff, for individual teams within your staff that are working on specific projects. You can set up as many sites as you want to, and you can configure them and give access to them in any which way that you prefer, including providing access to your customers. So collaborating with customers becomes a lot easier. And again, they can see and they have access to that system from anywhere, anytime, 24/7. So it provides you the biggest benefit you get from this as a company is the workplace agility that this gives your organization and the reduction in cost that this brings to your organization. You do have a cost in terms of changing your existing processes, in terms of making sure that your current processes still work with this cloud infrastructure and with moving your workplace onto the cloud and moving your employees onto the cloud. There's at times a cost associated with that, but the overall cost of running on the cloud versus running your own hardware and software and having an in-house IT department far outweighs the cost of running something on the cloud. So it's a cost-effective measure to take as a company. It's a cost-saving measure to take as a company, and it makes you more efficient at the same time, especially if you're looking at moving into a hybrid workforce. Hybrid workforces is a combination of using robotics and using people. And those robotics need to be hosted somewhere. And again, hosting them on the cloud means that they can be used and implemented anywhere around the world. So moving to the cloud as an organization is an individual decision, which cloud to choose. But you have to look at the benefits that you get in terms of the access to various systems, various developments. And very often we use Microsoft for this, but very often our applications come from the marketplace, which are developed by third parties. So there's a wide range of applications available for anyone using the Microsoft services, where you have another 3,500 programs you can actually install yourself, some paid, some free, where you can use within your organization. But as I said, if you're moving into hybrid workforces, having the hybrid part of it, the robotics part of it on the cloud just makes sense. And again, when you're using them, in adding cloud computing power or adding processing power or adding database power, you do that at the switch of a button. So you don't have to worry about purchasing hardware. You simply manage that within your cloud. And all of those run on a pay-as-you-use service on an SaaS model. So adding a database temporarily is perfectly possible. You can have a database up and running within minutes, and you can run that database for 15 minutes, and then you can uninstall that database, and you only pay for that 15 minutes of use. Okay, this brings us sort of to hybrid workforces. Again, we'll go into a great amount of detail here. And again, as I said before, if you have any questions at any time, feel free to ask or feel free to type those questions, and we'll address them at the end. Why hybrid workforces? What are the benefits of a hybrid workforce? Well, first of all, in simple terms, a hybrid workforce really just means the combination of human effort and robotics. And it's those two working together, working in tandem to get tasks done more efficiently and in as timely a manner as possible. Now, those robotics can be a variety of things. They can be, artificial intelligence based. They can be RPA or robotics process automation based, or they can be a combination of artificial intelligence and robotics process automation, or RPA. And it's basically, RPA in its simplest form is a dumb robot that does the same repetitive action time and time again. So a lot of the hybrid workforce evolves around automation of repetitive tasks. There's robots that are active that are purely used to sort through incoming email and to see, what that email is to be used for, which department needs access to that email, and the robot redistributes that email within the organization to make sure that that email gets to the right person within the shortest amount of time. So that's an example of a dumb, robot with a small degree of artificial intelligence attached to it. While for many people, robotics or introducing robotics into the workplace is a scary thing, the reality is that the main goal of creating a hybrid workforce is really moving your key staff members away from highly repetitive and very, very often mind-numbing tasks and get them to focus on more important aspects of the business and on tasks that will actually generate revenue for the company. So you want to decrease the amount of time that employees are involved in tasks that are not generating revenue or that are not beneficial to the company, and you want to increase the amount of time that they focus on those actions. And you want to take robotics or introduce robotics to actually get those repetitive tasks done. So robotics and automation really help you with cutting costs there, and it also makes your cost highly predictable. You know exactly how much it costs to run a robot in a cloud service. You know what you're paying for the cloud service, and you know how long that robot will take to do a certain task. So you can literally look at a task and define 100%, what the cost of that task is. At the same time, because your employee can now focus on items that are important for their job and their function. It can help with the employee's engagement. It can help with the employee's overall job satisfaction, because they're no longer working on the repetitive and boring things. They can actually focus on items that are important, and at the end of the day, have a greater degree of job satisfaction out of it. Obviously, introducing robotics into the workforce does mean that very often there's a reduction in certain jobs. So very often that means that people, lower skilled employees, may no longer be functioning in the jobs that they originally were hired for, because they're replaced by robotics. And what that in many cases means, that means upskilling of employees. That means training and refocusing of the current workforce, and which again helps give them a greater sense of achievement in the daily work, because they can contribute more to the bottom line and profitability of the company. It at the same time can create a reduction in labor cost. And the same with moving to the cloud. So if you have a hybrid workforce and you've moved your employees to the cloud, you can look at that from a compensation perspective and see, if our people work remotely, they have no expenses in terms of coming to the office, which means you can adjust your compensation packages. Having a hybrid workforce also makes you a lot more flexible and a lot more scalable. If you deploy robotics for email management, for example, or for chat management, you can deploy one robot, you can deploy 10 robots, 100, 1,000 robots, depending on the volume or the spike in volume that you are experiencing. And you can in a cloud-based environment, you can deploy them immediately. So if you see a spike in applications in your website and you have a robotic system in place that monitors applications and processes those applications, and they're getting overwhelmed by the number of requests, you can simply plug in the second, third, 100 robot to get the work done, which is something you cannot do with a standard workforce. You cannot just go on the street and hire someone. You need to train them. You need to, get them ready for the job, and you need to plug them into the job. Whereas with robotics, you can immediately do this. And as the spike diminishes, as you get a grasp on the work, you can reduce the number of robots involved in it. So it immediately gives you that benefit of being extremely scalable as an organization to deal with certain repetitive tasks. And these tasks can be quite complicated, which we'll go into examples later on today. It reduces errors, therefore, it again brings a more cost-effective measure to it. The more errors you have, the more repeat work you need to do, repeat tasks you need to do. So by reducing errors, robots do one step after next step after next step, depending on their programming. They will do every step every single time in exactly the same way. And as I said, it gives you that opportunity to refocus your workforce rather than make your workforce redundant. So you can actually use your people to do other more important tasks within your organization without the need of making them redundant. The difference between artificial intelligence and RPA, they are very different, but they are highly, highly complementary. Very often they work together, they work in tandem, but they have very distinct roles. Now, if you talk about RPA, or like I said, robotics process automation, here we are talking about taking an existing process and writing computer software around that process so that the software can automatically execute the process. There is no necessarily thinking involved in doing that. It is, taking information from one field, and based on that information, inputting that information into another field, or exporting that to a database, or putting it into a structured database, depending on the task that you want the robot to do. So they can, in that sense, be quite dumb. They're quite purpose written to do a specific thing, whereas artificial intelligence is all about problem solving and learning. So you have at one end a robot that does this repetitive, structured, rule-based work, and it does it very well, and it does it all the time, and it always does the same job. And then you have artificial intelligence, which can work in tandem with that robot to actually learn about what the robot is doing and to learn about the domain the robot is operating in, and therefore improve the way the work is being performed. So you have RPA, which is just doing what you tell it to do. And then you have artificial intelligence, which also does what you tell it to do, but it learns from what it is doing. It starts interpreting sentences. So if you take that same example of having a robot that reads through your email and that sorts your email and redistributes your email, if you apply artificial intelligence to that, then the robot can start reading the email and put the email into context. So even if it's not clear from the description or the header of the email what the person is looking for, with artificial intelligence, you can actually scan through the email, pick out keywords, start comparing those keywords to its own internal database, and keep track of what it is comparing. And therefore, the next time a similar email comes in, based on the fact that the email is similar, the artificial intelligence can decide that this needs to go to the same department for resolution. So it can start interpreting what it is reading, and based on the information that it's consolidated over time, it gets smarter and more efficient at its job. So, like I said, both very often work in parallel, they work in tandem in achieving the automation within organizations. Now, as we discussed before, obviously there is an impact that this has on the workforce, and there's a lot of negative perception around this automation. It's great at one end where people say, yes, it's great for executing repetitive tasks, and cognitive technologies that self-learn sounds fantastic, and therefore I can get rid of all my people. That sounds great in terms of C-level employees or shareholders that look purely at cost of operating the business. But of course, it has an impact on people, and the projected impact is that by 2030, RPA AI will actually replace 30% of human labor. That means that 30% of the people that would normally be in the workforce would be replaced, or their jobs rather would be replaced by RPA and AI, which is projected to cause a displacement of 400 to 800 million jobs by that time. And 375 million people that will have to switch job categories entirely. Now, 375 million people is the population of more than the population of the United States. So, as you can imagine, repetitive jobs will be replaced by AI and RPA, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's all doom and gloom. Yes, jobs will be displaced. However, if we look at how this works historically, it teaches us that historically this type of event, like for instance the first industrial revolution, actually, which saw a dramatic change in manufacturing, and the second industrial revolution, at the start of the last century, which was a technological revolution, it caused what we commonly refer to as a shifting composition of employment, which means it really triggers two different effects. You have a destruction effect, which is workers are required to relocate their labor supply. The job that they were doing no longer exists, or has been replaced, or has been made obsolete, depending on the type of robotics put in play. And then you have a capitalization effect, which is companies will start shifting and industries will start shifting to where the profitability is higher. So if they see that there's an increase in robotics, but also a consecutive increase in profitability, industries will actually start shifting into those higher profitability sectors, which then in consequence leads to higher employment rates in those industries. So you see jobs disappear in certain industries, which then consequently creates jobs or more jobs in other industries. And that really creates a cause and effect cycle, where an increase in production efficiency results in overall reduced prices of goods. As companies are able to produce their products more efficiently, that actually costs them less to produce them, and therefore they can sell them at a lower price. Selling goods at a lower price leads to an increase in real income over time. With real income, we mean that people still earn the same as they were earning yesterday. However, their buying power is greater because the cost of the goods that they're buying is lower, which then in turn again leads to increased demand. And increased demand leads back into increased work, which sort of gives that whole cause and effect cycle. So it's, yes, there are jobs that will be impacted, There are jobs that will disappear by introducing robotics into the workforce, by introducing cloud computing into the workforce. But there are also jobs that will be created because of it. And if you look at the last 10 years, for example, there's a lot of jobs that all of you know today that literally didn't exist 10 years ago. A simple example for that is a YouTuber. YouTube has been around for more than 10 years, but roughly around 10 years ago is when people really started doing YouTube as a job. And they became professional YouTubers, and they're literally posting videos on a daily basis or weekly basis. They've captured a wide audience. They have millions of followers, and therefore they're generating advertising revenue, and it became their full-time job. Some have businesses around it with multiple employees. This is a type of job that didn't exist 10 years ago. The same thing for an Instagram influencer, the same thing for a Twitch streamer, etc. There's a lot of jobs that were born out of the technological evolution that we're going through today that we didn't think about 15 years ago, 20 years ago, that was simply non-existent. They came into existence, and there is more jobs that will come into existence that we haven't thought about today. And you will see workforces shifting. You see, you saw with YouTube, you saw a number of office workers or fresh graduates or university students deciding that they did not want to go work for a company. They wanted to be independent, and they wanted to launch their own TV series, basically through YouTube. So AI and RPA replacement of jobs, of employees, will lead to opening up new jobs that we haven't thought about before today, that we haven't realized before today. So yes, there is a lot of stress within the workforce around this in terms of it may cost jobs to disappear, it may cost people their jobs. It's up to the employer and governments to ensure that this is handled in an ethical way. It's up to employers to look at how can we, refocus our workforce. Where can we make the best use of our workforce? Where do we want their skills to be applied, and not in the repetitive things? We want their skills to be applied in what is productive for us, what gives us return on investment. And you've seen this in the past as well. You've seen this in manufacturing, and especially car manufacturing, where a lot of the work was replaced by robotics because of safety reasons, because of people. This was hard labor. This was hard on people to actually work there physically, and a number of these jobs are being replaced by robots, but they're still being supported by human workers that are still in control of that whole manufacturing line. So the workers that were working on the line are now still there, but they're working on controlling the robots that are on the line. Similar example you may have seen is the Amazon warehouse, where the goods in the warehouse today are transported across the warehouse by robots, and the people that were transporting the goods before in that warehouse are now the ones that are controlling the robots. So their focus has shifted from doing the manual labor to controlling multiple machines that are doing the manual labor. So that is an evolution you will see, within the workforce and within job sites. As I said before, AI. Sorry, let me go to the next slide. AI is a wide spectrum of things, and so a lot of these things very often work in tandem. You have machine learning, which is deep learning, predictive analysis, which is the learning and growing of itself. But then you have robotics, which are used in combination with machine learning to create artificial intelligence systems that can interpret email reading, that can interpret dealing with processes. You also have speech recognition, speech to text or text to speech. You have translation services, you have natural language processing. You probably have come across this, where you go to websites where there's a chatbot that pops up and starts talking to you and starts helping you. More and more and more, these are actually artificial intelligent chatbots that are using natural language processing to talk with you. And while they're talking with you, they're learning more about what your needs are, what your wants are, and they are becoming smarter and therefore better able to help you, with still having that option for human intervention. So a person can still come in between and help out if the robot gets stuck. But they're actually allowing companies to be online 24/7 and not having to employ employees 24/7 to do so. So very often they're very good at a very particular subset of intelligence, and they can create very powerful solutions in their own rights. But they always need humans still in the end of that equation to help manage the process for them. So let me give you an example of a AI process. Sorry. So here we have a manual process versus an RPA process in this case, which is from insurance, if I'm not mistaken, where manually, humans would periodically log into the system, check for new orders, or in this case, order process management. They were checking for new orders. And once they confirm a request, then they validate the purchase order. Then they apply specific pricing and discounts to the order based on the client, based on the number of parameters. Then the human, would in this case apply an additional 1% discount if it was outlined in a protocol. And then the purchased order is shipped and invoiced. And very often, this whole process, this manual process, had some degree of error in it, where misshipping happens or misdiscounting happens, or the purchaser has to contact the supplier and say, well, this is not what I asked for, these are not the goods that I asked for, etc. So this can easily be replaced, or has been replaced in many cases, by RPA, where it's actually the software that pulls the data from the customer system. The software checks for new orders. Once it has identified that there is a new order, it downloads the order, it immediately puts the order into the legacy system, and it copy pastes from that order. So there is no error or human error in between. However, even in the automated process, there's still a human that validates the order, for accuracy based on the terms of the contract. So the people are still involved in that process, but then it's handed back off to the software that then uploads the purchase order and automatically applies the purchase order based on the customer agreement. So the software, because the agreements are all standardized, the software can read the standardized agreement and standardized terms and conditions and apply them. So what you see with this particular process is that the people that were involved in the manual process, where a lot of it was very repetitive work, that repetitive work has been replaced by robotics, and they managed to refocus the skill set of those people on validating of the order rather than processing the order. It's similar to the example I gave for the Amazon warehouse, where the people that were doing the stacking of goods are now taking care or in charge of the robots that are doing the stacking of goods. It's the same here. The people that were processing the order, which can be a very repetitive, very labor-intensive work, has now been reduced to validating the work done by the robots. So the workforce isn't displaced, it isn't made redundant, it is simply reused and put to best use for the company. I have a few other examples of this that I want to go through. We have order process management, similar to what we just talked about. We actually developed a system for a very large multinational company which had the same problem. Their process orders were sitting with their suppliers in their suppliers' intranet systems. Their employees had to go into the supplier system, check if there was a purchase order placed, download that purchase order with a lot of issues of losing connection, slow systems, lack of standardization, etc. It took an employee on average 35 minutes to actually download a purchase order. By putting robotics in place and making sure that the employees became in charge of validating the orders rather than then processing the orders, we reduced the order process part of this process from 35 minutes down to 30 seconds. So robotics were able to simply execute this given a standard straightforward script. There was no AI involved, and they were able to process that order in 30 seconds and then hand it off to the human operator for validation, and then the human operator would hand it off to the next robotic process. So that was a reduction on every single purchase order from 35 minutes to 30 seconds. The insurance industry has a lot of this already done today. They use RPA software to process basic policies, so like their local insurance issuance processes are done through RPA systems nowadays. So if you go to a website and you apply for insurance, the website actually has robotics in place that checks your application, that validates its own insurance policy process. And that implementation frees up the consultants, the commercial underwriters that were working on this before manually, and they're focusing their energy on more complex policies and more specific requirements, where the robots are taking care of 90% of the process or 90% of the customers. You have the underwriters that were doing that before are now focused on the 10% that are outside of the norm, for which they need human intervention. Similarly, we had an HR recruitment system where we automated and built AI robotics to read resumes and understand resumes, where again the robot can read a resume. Resumes have a standard set of items in them, but it's about teaching the AI how to interpret the structure of a resume, how to recognize the name of an individual versus the name of a company, how to recognize when a person is talking about jobs rather than talking about schooling and education experience, and to take all that information and put that into a structured database. So what the robot does, it's the first point of contact for the applicant. The robot looks at the resume. The robot, in this case, using natural language processing, asks some questions from the applicant if the resume doesn't really match the qualifications for the job or the requirements for the job. So if the robot can ascertain that not all of the requirements are fulfilled, it can immediately go back to the candidate and ask the candidate some questions as to, hey, for this particular function, we need project management experience. I don't see project management experience in your resume. Can you give me a little bit more information about this? The robot receives that answer, consolidates that answer, and then parses that into a structured database. And that's when the recruiter itself, the individual, comes in, and they already get a heads up from the robot in this case to say, hey, I have this many applicants for project manager. This is the experience, average experience these people have. And this resume, even though at first glance the person doesn't have project management experience, I've asked them an additional question and they've given me the overview of what we're looking for. So the recruiter immediately gets better information about the candidates without wasting the recruiter's time on chasing people. If the robot asks that person, can you give me more information about project management, and the person comes back and says, well, I'm sorry, I don't have project management experience, then the robot immediately can make a decision that this candidate is not the right person for this job, store the information of the candidate in the database, and if another function comes up, the robot can check the database and see if there's candidates in there that are viable candidates that they already know of. Similarly, we have a booking RPA system that we've developed for customers where, for real estate, where you, again, talk to a natural language processing chatbot. Based on the conversation you have with the bot determines what your ideal housing is like based on the houses they have in the database. The robot gives you a house or an apartment, depending on whether you want to buy or sell or rent, depending on the number of bedrooms you have, children, facilities you need, everything else. The robot determines this through chatting with you, and then it hands it off to a secondary robot that actually manages the entire booking process. So it books the property for you, so you can visit the property, make sure that the keys are there, that there's someone there to represent the property, that a real estate agent is aware, that they show you the property, and it follows up in terms of what you liked about it, what you didn't like about it. It follows up in terms of what the next step in the process is, whether you want to rent it or buy it or sell it, whatever the occasion might be. And it keeps track of the real estate agents, and it allows the real estate agents to focus on the sales aspect of the process rather than the entire process itself. Previously, you would talk to a real estate agent. The agent would have to discern, what you really want, what you're looking for. Then they would have to do a search in your database. All of that work is replaced by robotics and natural language processing, but it is the agent that is still very much in charge of the sales process itself. It's the agent that visits the property with you and shows you the property. And what it has done for agents is that they can actually focus purely on the sales part and not on the lead generation part, and therefore they actually are able to sell more properties and rent out more properties than previously, because 60-70% of their time was stuck in administration, where now only 10% of their time is stuck in administration. So these are all real world examples of intelligent automation systems that we have built that have not displaced people, but that have moved companies from being manually operated companies onto cloud-operated companies with robotics in place that are taking care of the repetitive functions, within the organization. So, in conclusion, in a quest for cost saving, for scalability, speed of transactions, companies have been exploring and implementing artificial intelligence, RPA, and cloud computing for quite a number of years. And recent events that happened, such as the second half of 2019, where we were seeing an economic recession and a decline in many economies around the world. And then on top of that, we had the COVID-19 pandemic, which is still very much ongoing today in a large number of countries and still affecting large numbers of people. Large industries like tourism industries are completely affected by this. We will continue to see these kind of events happening, and that just further cements the needs for many, many companies to start thinking differently about how you deal with your workforce, how you deal with your customers, how do you become more efficient, How do you make your employees more efficient? How do you enable your employees to work remotely or from home, and yet maintaining a proper work-life balance? So this is something that companies need to start looking at. You have decentralization and automation and scalability, which are the drivers for the next technological evolution, and that evolution is already taking place. Which we know will result in a shifting composition of employment. And we don't know yet exactly what the new jobs are going to look like, but we'll find out in due time. Hybrid workforces are being deployed across the board. You have insurance, you have real estate, you have recruitment as examples that I've mentioned today. We have order process management. That all of them are looking and implementing robotics and AI today in cloud-based environments. And so hybrid workforces are more and more becoming a reality, and it's no longer just a matter of cost saving. This is really becoming a foundation for better work-life balance. It allows employees to focus on satisfying work, not on repetitive work, and give a greater job satisfaction as an outcome. And of course, none of these are easy to implement. We know that. The integration complexities are there. You have to integrate it with existing systems. If you look at the example I gave about Microsoft, that's a fully integrated cloud infrastructure. There's always a degree of integration to do for companies, which is complex, which is why we, like Avalon Labs, work with companies to guide them through those complexities. But yes, just as a summary, cloud computing is here, and it's been here for a while. And hybrid workforces are growing more and more and more, especially in light of events that happened last year, this year, and who knows what more events that will happen in the coming future. So it is coming, and it is up to companies to start preparing for it. Okay, having said that, let's open up the Q&A. So I see a number of questions.
Yes, we have one question here in front of me from our audience named Moshet, asking, in cloud computing, where are the data stored and are they secure?
Okay, so in cloud computing, your data is stored in the cloud. It is stored. You don't actually know exactly where your data is stored. You upload it onto the cloud, which goes into a wide variety of data centers around the world. So the part of your data may sit in Singapore, part of your data may sit in Europe. You might have two documents. So let's, for example, say you have 3 documents that you stored in your SharePoint site on the cloud. And one document might be hosted in a data center in Singapore, one might be hosted in a data center in San Francisco, and one might be hosted in Germany. You absolutely have no idea exactly where your data is stored. And the reality is that it doesn't matter. The way clouds operate is that they have full spillover systems. So if you need 100 megabytes of storage space, it will grab that 100 megabytes from wherever it is available. It is developed by, it's built to be most efficient for itself. So it makes most efficient use of its own capacities and availability. If you want to increase your storage, it will grab that storage from wherever it needs to grab it, wherever it is available. So it is the cloud provider that is managing this for you. You don't have to worry about that anymore. In terms of so your data is stored anywhere around the world within the data centers of your cloud provider. Amazon has massive data centers in the US, Microsoft has massive data centers in the US, but I also know that all of them have data centers in various locations around the world. The reason they do this is that if something goes wrong with one data center, they can immediately emulate that entire environment in another data center, and therefore, as a consumer, you wouldn't even be aware that something has happened. You would hear about it, but it wouldn't actually disrupt your work. It wouldn't interfere with your daily work. In terms of security, again, these are providers of data centers to you. So all of them are certified. All of them are governmentally supervised. Their function, their job is to provide you with space. It's like renting a space in a storage facility. The storage facility is responsible for security. It is their business is renting you space. Their business is not looking at what you are doing in the space that you're renting. And it's very similar in these cases. As I said, we have a number of projects for a recruitment platform that we've developed, for which is being used by all the major banks in Thailand. And the only reason we were actually approved on these projects has nothing to do with how great our software was, but everything to do that we are using Azure, and Azure has all the required classifications and certifications that are required by governments and by banks, and that we ourselves use, that banks require us to have. Let me give you a list of this. So they're ISO compliant, they're IEC compliant, they're CMM compliant, CSA compliant. They follow ITAR, they follow CGIS, they follow HIPAA, and IRS 1075. They have all these certificates that they give to you. And the fact that you are hosting with them means you are automatically certified. So it is actually a benefit of hosting on the cloud, because you don't have to do that individual certification for your own server farm. It's the server farm of the cloud provider that is certified, and that makes you automatically certified if you're using their services. So they have high security standards in place. They have, you have a contract with them that they have to maintain that. But it is really no different from running any software that you have in a server farm in Bangkok. Then you have to trust that server farm provider to have the security in place. In this case, you're trusting, Microsoft or Amazon or Google to have that security in place to manage for you. Similarly, every system that we deploy with customers, and that is up to you when you build the software, every system that we build for customers is one single system. They're all cloud-based. So every customer uses the exact same system, but it's all linked to a different database for each customer. And those databases are 100% separated and unique to a customer. So even though they're using the same software, it's the same as even though they're using the same software, they're only ever seeing their own data. Their login is linked to their instance on the cloud and only to their instance on the cloud. So our customers can only see their own data. It is exactly the same if you were using Word from Office 365. If you're using the online version of Word, that does exactly the same thing. Because of your login, you're going to see your documents. You're not going to see anyone else's documents. So these structures are built specifically around this scalability, data management, and data security. And they provide you all the certificates required. And like I said, in many cases, in practically all cases, they are more highly certified than internal IT systems or existing offsite data centers.
Thanks. So you want the supplementary question from the same colleague is that so then in that case, who own that data? So the colleagues asking who is about ownership of the data. So who own that data in that case when it is kept in cloud?
So you own the data. It is the easiest way to think of this is like renting a storage space. So if you rent a storage space, you rent a specific, let's say a 4 square meter room in which you're going to store your personal belongings. This is, in the simplest context, it is exactly the same thing. You are renting space in the cloud in which you're going to store your personal belongings. You own the data, you own the information, you own the software that you store there. So we've developed solutions for our customers that we're hosting for our customers on the cloud. And it's the IP is owned by our customers. So the customer owns the software, and everything that happens in the software and all the data that resides in the software is owned by the customer, and it is hosted in the cloud with Microsoft. And Microsoft simply provides the service, and we pay for that service. But the data, the software, everything that we've built for this customer belongs to the customer, simply is hosted there. So use that analogy of a storage facility where you're putting your personal belongings in a storage facility. They still belong to you. You're simply renting the space. It is no different from renting an apartment. You rent an apartment, all the furniture in the apartment is your furniture, but you're renting the space. You're doing the same thing in a cloud environment.
The next question is coming from audience named Achik Rahman. So he's asking, whether there will be future opportunity that there will be a workshop related to the cloud computing that may be organized by AIT in close collaboration with the Abalone Labs.
Yes. So the answer to that is yes. We are organizing about 10 different workshops towards the end of July, which we will send out to all participants at the end after the session, around digital transformation, around cloud computing, around blockchain technology, artificial intelligence, hybrid workforces, and also very specific workshops catering to how do you deal with the workforce? How do you deal with communication in these new times? what to look out for, how do you change processes, how do you change communication within organizations. So yes, we're organizing workshops on this towards the end of July.
So, Ivan, there are another two questions. One is from audience named Atesh. Considering we are going for the data analytics based services, which one gives more flexibilities on approach environment? Is that Azure or the Google Cloud?
Okay, from now I have to talk from personal experience, because this really depends on what exactly you want to implement. But personally, I would say Azure. And the reason I'm saying Azure is that it is an incredibly integrated environment. You're like I said, your Office 365 products are there, so your daily work is there, your spreadsheets are there, your accounting is there. Like I said, we use it also for time and attendance and everything else in our company. And if you're using Azure, Azure comes with a large set of services that you can simply plug in. Now, don't forget, especially if you're doing software development, you're also using Microsoft to write the software that you're developing, and you can plug in Azure services. So if you look at a simple example that everyone's familiar with, if you're using Azure services, you actually have a login service that you don't have to build for your system. There's an existing component there that provides login to your system, which allows people to log in using Google or Facebook or email and register. These are existing services that you simply plug in. So, building a login to a computer software, if you're using Azure services, it takes you about 2 hours and you're up and running. So they have, and login is just a very simple example. They have a lot of variety of these services available that you can basically plug and play and plug into your system. So if you're looking at data analytics, they have AI built in or AI components that you can use for your data analytics. Again, they're both very good at it. So it really depends on exactly what system you want to build. But personally, I lean more towards Microsoft Azure for this very simple reason that it allows me to manage my company. It allows everyone to do their work, whether that's software development or administration or anything else. And it gives us all these flexible services all in one fully integrated environment.
Another questions from anonymous audience attendees is a practical questions that if this pandemic is over, is gone, and then how the organization or company has to prepare in order to make the people in the company adjust to the new technologies that is coming into the companies.
Well, actually, this is very much what we are talking about. So if I take my own company as an example, right, we were already 100% using Microsoft services, Azure, Office 365 before the pandemic. We've always used this. We've used this for years. And so in end of February, beginning of March, we made a decision that everyone had to start working remotely. The country was going into lockdown. And that literally meant for us just communicating to employees, no longer come to the office, we're going to work remote. And we are working on, and we will distribute a schedule for communication to all of you within the next hour. That's it. That was our entire moving the office from working in an office to working from home. We were done. Everyone had access to everything. We were already prepared for this. We have actually made the decision not to reopen our office. So our office is gone now. We've actually closed the physical office. We've actually closed last month. So because everyone was able to work remotely, everyone was working from home or from wherever, and because all the communication, everything worked extremely well, all of our customer projects remained ongoing, the productivity remained the way it was, we've actually made a decision to not reopen the office itself. We will open a much smaller component of it just for meetings with clients, but we are never reopening our office. So this is really very, very dependent on the company and where the company is. I know companies that, because of the pandemic, had to close, and that basically meant that their productivity went to zero, because their people could no longer work from the office, and they had no means in place for people to work from the office. Their productivity simply went to zero. Those companies need to look at, what do I do? Do I implement digital transformation? Do I implement cloud? They need to start making decisions now as to how will I reopen. And I think, in terms of adjusting, I think I can almost guarantee that it will be a hybrid approach going forward. And when I say a hybrid approach, is that there will be a lot of companies going forward where people will not all work in the office. A lot more people will be working from home going forward. A lot more companies are starting to realize that, having all this office space isn't really necessary. People that are traveling a lot may as well just work from home. They don't need to come to the office. Therefore, we do not need to reserve space. We can save cost with that. A lot of functions have now moved where, if you're a call center employee, there's no reason to be in the office if you can do it from home. You can be a call center employee from home, provided you have the right setup. So what I would predict happening, and this is purely a prediction, of course, is that you will see a shift where companies are going to be looking more at, can you actually work remote? I would imagine that even part of the recruitment process, there will be questions around, is this a job that can function remotely, or is this a job for which we require people to come to the office? And the same for candidates. Like, as a candidate, I would imagine that part of your resume will become, I am fully set up to work remote, meaning I have a workspace at home, I have a computer at home, I have a good internet connection, and I'm leasing that internet connection, that setup that I have, to the company. So part of my compensation package is going to be, you compensate me for my infrastructure at home, but you don't need to pay for the infrastructure in the office, which is far more expensive. So I would imagine that you are going to see some hybrids there, that companies will reopen, but only partially. Some will fully reopen, and some will, like us, not reopen. Well, we are open. We've never actually closed, but we will not reopen our office. So I think you're going to see a mix of the three. It's hard to predict, because right now we don't know when this pandemic will be over. Thailand is doing great. There's a number of countries in Asia that are doing really, really well. But there's still a lot of countries that are having a lot of problems right now, and it doesn't look like this problem will be solved, this pandemic will be solved for the foreseeable future. There is no vaccine in place today, and that's going to take another 9 to 12 months for that to become in place. So a lot of industries are going to be disrupted for quite a while more.
Yeah, that's very interesting analysis, especially on the preparation of the interview for the new jobs, and also the advantage of adding the flexibility of the potential recruiters, potential recruitees, to work in organization where they have the office both from home and also from the office. There is a supplementary questions in related to Azure and the Google Cloud. What is the perspective from the cost and the performance between these two?
Okay, so cost, if you look at Azure, Google, and Amazon, they really all cost about the same. There's very little cost difference between them. There is a difference in how they charge you. So if you look at and let me just take Amazon and Azure as an example. Azure purely charges you on a use basis. So for the Office 365 components, that means you buy a license and you pay for that license as long as you use it, and you can simply disconnect it, and therefore you're not paying for it. If you're talking about cloud services like database and storage and virtual machines, you rent them, and there you pay for the amount of time that you use it, the amount of time that you rent it. But then when you're talking about actual use, so let's say that you have an application that you're hosting on the cloud, so you're renting space in Azure to host. So you're renting space to host, but then of course there's the connection, the number of users that are going to be using your application. So in Azure, they charge you minute by minute on the usage. And if that goes up, you pay more. If that goes down, you pay less. So if you have 1 million users in 1 minute and the next minute you have 200 users, you will actually pay a lot less for the second minute and you will pay more for that first minute. That structure is different in Amazon Web Services, where it is by day, not by minute. So it depends on how they actually charge you for the number of concurrent users. So the prices itself, the hosting prices are virtually the same. And interestingly enough, and especially in the last couple of years, these prices continue to go down. As these companies are growing bigger and bigger and hosting more and more, their infrastructure is increasing, and therefore your cost of use is actually decreasing. So every 6 months, they kind of adjust their price, but they adjust it downwards. What you need to look out for between the three is how you're going to be charged for the end user, the number of concurrent users you will have on the system. Because the more users you have, that makes a difference in price. And then it depends on whether they charge you on a daily basis, on an hourly basis, on a minutely basis, on the usage. So that is really what I would look out for is the concurrent users that you're going to have, whether that's visitors to your website, whether that is people logged into your platform.
One question from Santanu Malik in relation to the situation where now the COVID pandemic in US is not getting better. And still, in the previous time, we rely a lot on the US technologies on this. Is more on reliable, that one. So if we are going to change, I mean, is that we will be able to trust if those technology is more coming from China now in comparisons to the US, given that the pandemic might obstruct the development of technology from the US side?
I would say I don't think that is actually a sector that's going to be that disrupted. I think if you talk about software development in the US, most of the companies we're talking about are very large and are really already set up for their employees to work remotely. If you look at Microsoft, they are the people behind Azure. Their employees all have access to these cloud-based environments. They're all fully cloud functioning. And again, there, especially in the US, I can foresee that more and more and more it will be work from home, work remote. So if you look at Azure, of Microsoft, sorry, they have Teams, they have Azure, they have 365. So they're completely set up for people to work. All these systems were built for people to work remotely, to work between teams. Don't forget that especially if you talk about software development, every software development company today, or almost every software development company today, does not develop their software in one single location. Even if I look at our own company, we have a team in Bangkok, we have a team in Vietnam, we have a team in India, and we have a team in the UK. And these people work with each other constantly. I have, other colleagues for different companies. If I look at Amadeus, I used to work for Amadeus. They have a huge software development team in Nice, in France. I had a software development team for Amadeus here in Bangkok, and there were software development teams in the Philippines and Singapore, just to name some locations. Even the Amadeus team in France, which is about 6,000 people, they had a subsidiary in India where they had another 2,000 developers. There isn't a single large software development company today that is purely located in one physical location. They are all already geographically distributed. So if you look at the likes of Microsoft or Google or Amazon, they all have centers in India, they have centers in Bangalore, they have centers in the US, they have centers in Europe. And this has been going on for years. I don't know if you're aware, but like IBM's customer service center used to be in Ireland. And that was always in Ireland. So whenever you would call IBM customer service, you would talk to someone in Ireland. All of these companies have always been set up to work in geographically distributed locations. So they're very much used to working remotely and working from home. I don't necessarily see that that's going to cause a shift in us having to move to use software from China. Now, having said that, of course, there is a big software revolution taking place in China. Right? And I know that you've seen the news around TikTok, and TikTok is banned again in India. TikTok is a Chinese platform. So it's a bit down to users. Educate yourself where your software comes from. Do you trust the Chinese? You can't generalize and say I don't trust the Chinese. Do you trust the Chinese government? And do you trust what the degree of control they have? If you look at a platform like TikTok, it was built in China. There are concerns about the security of that system. Not that the developers didn't make it secure, but the influence of the government and what the government wants in terms of information from solution providers. So it's more of a question towards, what is the government regulation around it? And do you trust these companies? But if you look at platforms like TikTok, it took the world by storm and no one thought about the security. But the same happened with Facebook. You have a US-based system where everyone was happily sharing all their private information, and Facebook then mines that information and pushes advertising out to you, which you don't necessarily agree or remember agreeing to. Facebook has done the same. A lot of these tech giants have done the same. This is up to governments and world organizations to regulate use of data. There's lots of data privacy laws. Thailand is introducing new data privacy laws right now. They've been in the works for a number of years. This is governments that need to start regulating this. In terms of the software developers for the software that you're using today, I don't see a big shift in that. Other than, yes, there is a booming software development market in China, and therefore you're going to see more products come out of China. If you look at WeChat as a platform, WeChat combines Facebook, Google, Instagram, Twitter, Snapchat, WhatsApp, Line, PayPal, any app on your phone is available in a single app in China, and it's called WeChat. That's a very powerful platform. Whether we're ever going to see that outside of China, I don't know, but it could be hugely successful.
I raised one of the questions that this may be very useful for the audience as well. I mean, one of the worrisomes that we can have is in many organizations is that now the data that we are having is in papers, and do we need to do a lot of homeworks, or is it will be very costly to transform those data into the digital ready form that we can also apply into the digital technology that happen very fast?
Oh, yes. Well, your data is yes and no paper based, right? I would assume that even an organization like AIT, for example, most of your data resides in a database. Now, that database might be Microsoft Excel, but that is still a database. It's a consolidated form of keeping track of data. You have contracts that you have with employees and students, etc. And again, they may all, there is an example of that somewhere on someone's computer, that is for sure. But these contracts may be signed and only stored in hard copy and not stored in soft copy. So it becomes a question of storing everything in soft copy. And for companies, that may mean you have to scan a lot of your documents and then first figure out what cloud structure you're going to use, what your document tree is going to be there, and uploading those soft copies into the cloud. I know personal documents, like we've talked about this before. I have a lot of personal documents over the years, and I live abroad, so I need these documents constantly. All of these documents, my identification documents, birth certificates, marriage certificates, all of these documents are scanned and they are stored on the cloud because I constantly need them, which means I can access them from a phone, I can access them from a computer, wherever I am, whenever someone requests me for that information. For organizations, yes, this will require some scanning of documents that you need to upload to the cloud. But at the same time, it usually also means it's time to clean up. Very often, especially with hard copy saving, people just accumulate documents and documents and documents, and they keep them forever rather than periodically cleaning it up. So moving to a cloud-based environment might also indicate, clean up your house and clean up your administration, and actually, decide what you want to keep and what you need to keep. There's a regulatory requirement to keep certain documents 5 years or 7 years or 10 years, depending on where you are. But in many cases, companies have information that is way older than that. Scan that in if it's not in electronic format and then upload it to the cloud. There is some work involved, but it's, the cost of storing the documents is also using up space. You store them on the cloud, you're using a little bit of space on the cloud.
Well, Ivan, thank you very much, Ivan Spilbin, for your time with us today, and also your presentation and your information, as well as the answer that you addressed all the questions that we have from the audience. So this is actually very useful for the start of the digital transformation series. And as the audience know, that we are going to have the next series of the program for the webinar and also the workshops and also training course. So you can stay tuned with that. So after this, our team will send you the feedback. I mean, to reach to you in order to get your feedback. And also, if you would like us to organize, or if you have any specific issues, more questions, or any suggestion on the course that AIT can do it for you, in order to share the knowledge and information for you, please feel free to do so, and also send information to AIT. So thank you very much, everybody. And we wish to see you again in the next event organized by AIT and our partners, Abalones and Blockchain Labs. Thanks a lot.